Hey everybody. I just thought I'd give one final gift to Serenity, just to make sure that you guys are in the best possible spot, coming into the race, after the first round of PTR testing already being completed and bringing a new tank in. I just need to find it real quick. Let's see. Cheers is cooking. No, that's not it. Fig admitting that Emmy is always right. No, not it either. Pictures of people who think blood DPS is a thing. No, not it. I don't think it's Insta finger blasting my asshole or Zoo fucking a midget clown either. Could be Kanga being dumb. Um, uh, yeah, just the normal stuff there. Okay, here it is. Break only in case of emergencies. Okay, so now that the funny business is over, this is mainly geared towards any tanks that may be coming in. Zoo, you can possibly use this for your G-bids. I didn't put a whole lot of effort into it, but still thought it might be useful just based on my initial experience in the PTR. So this is an incomplete ICC tank boss guide via PowerPoint. Fig, you still fucking smell. Lord Marigar, like, I didn't tank this on the PTR, but honestly, like, who fucking cares? Just sit there, tank it, get cleaved, bone spikes a melee thing, lol, keck W, get fucked, bone storm. Yeah. Two. Okay, this is where things actually start to get serious. So for Lady Death Whisper, anybody who initiates the fight, she is more geriatric than Cheers is. She can't see you if you stand behind the pillar literally 3 feet away from her, so you can start there to engage as soon as possible. In phase one, when you're still breaking the mana shield, run in, do a small opener on her. The ads spawn pretty quickly after the start of the fight. I think it's like 10 to 15 seconds. Ideally at about like the 5 second mark, right? You really want to be moving towards those ads. I always grabbed the right ad first, using like Avenger's Shield, drop a Consecrate in the middle. The ad on the far left is naturally going to run this way anyway because of the healers, so you don't have to worry about that too much. Just, Hammer of the Righteousness as they get close, build up threat on these other two. It's not uncommon for a melee to get aggro first, especially like a warrior. Just Righteous Defense off them. Don't Hand of Reckoning, because you're going to want a Hand of Reckoning this ad that spawns at the top of the stairs as it comes down. If it is a caster ad, just call for a DK grip. Mouse and Ixie are really, reactive to that. Just DK grip it in, and then taunt it. If it's far away, just ask for like a kick, or if you haven't used your shield, you can throw your shield at it then. If it's just the regular melee mob, it's going to run down this way to like the healers or maybe a warlock that dots it up before you even look at it, because her range DPS. Just on it with Hand of Reckoning as it gets close. The only thing to really watch out for is the melee ads do cleave, so just be on the lookout for that. If you have to kill a melee, just aim for Zalp, because honestly, he's more useful on the floor anyway. His computer's probably going to freeze regardless, so, fuck him, right? You're gonna have some empowered ads. I'm not gonna go into that too much. That's just too much to explain. Just look up like what the empowered ads do and just be vocal with what empowered ad you have. I will go into like the big hulking one. If one of them turns into a bomb, you need to just fucking run away from that thing. Call that it's gonna be weak on threat. Treat it like an assault bot on Mimron, like cocaine. Like crack. Like that guy is going to like pull your asshole out, blow it like a piece of bubble gum, and put it right back in there. And he's gonna make this little like sound. It's going to be really funny if you get hit. Going into phase two, Mana Shield is broken. Now you're in charge of the boss. This could change. On the PTR, I started out handling the ads that spawn in phase two, but ultimately, I think it was just a gearing thing, which made me tank the boss. So that could be subject to change depending on how the other tank gear is. However, this is going to be talking from a stance that you are, in fact, tanking the boss. You're going to get a debuff on you that's going to reduce your threat. Also, I'm just going to kind of say it, out loud. I'm going to expect that you have a basic understanding of how these fights work. This guide is going to be tailored to like tips and tricks of what I learned. I'm not going to really go into like all the mechanics. It's more so expecting that you know what's going on, and this is just what I observed or learned while doing these fights. Probably should have put that at the beginning, but I'm 4.5 minutes in and way too lazy to go back and do that now. So, moving forward, just treat it like that. So the ghosts were the biggest things for us, right? And realistically, we always wanted Death Whisper on the side that the ads were on or going to spawn on. One thing that I noticed very quickly was I was not really caring about when the ads spawned per se, right? Like I didn't really care too much about that. It was more so when the ghosts were spawning because the ads themselves were a part of the fight, but they weren't like crucial to it. If the ads were still alive as new ads were getting ready to come out, the other tank just needs to call and the DPS just need to focus them down real quick. They don't have a lot of health, so they're not like too much of a concern. The ghosts is what the concern was because it was very hard to see, especially in a melee pile, where the ghosts were going. So what I was doing was I was waiting for the ghosts to spawn before I would move the boss. And I have a little diagram here that I'll try and like recreate that with, right? So let's just say the ads were over here, right? They were on the left side, but they're dead now. You've got new ads spawning on the right. But let's say you've got like 3 seconds until the ghost spawn. And let's see, like a ghost spawns there, ghost spawns here, and like a ghost spawns here, right? Well, where the ghosts spawn is what's going to determine where you want to move the boss because you want as much distance possible between the melee and the ghost. That way they can maximize their uptime. Ranged are honestly on their own. If a ranged ever gets hit by an ad, they're just griefing. But it is generally harder for the melee to see. So if we got the ad spawning there, my ideal situation is then to bring her here, right? Because then I'm maximizing my distance between them, right? So that's just kind of like the gist of it. Obviously, you got to watch for like death and decay and stuff like that, but I was always waiting for the ghost to spawn before I moved the boss over to the new set of ads, and then just kind of moving in like a small circle of that area as ghosts spawned, or until these ads were dead, at which point you do the same thing, just mirror on the other side. So that's Lady Death Whisper. It's definitely a fight that you just got to like look at. You got to see it in order to get like a grasp of it. But that definitely helped, which was learning to wait for the ghost to spawn before moving her. Loot ship, pretty simple. There's not much to really say about it. I was in charge of staying on the ship. Raid.io only has the Alliance ship, so ignore this. Just pretend it's the Horde ship. I just stayed over there. There's a portal that spawns, and ads come out of it. Just tank them. The sergeants, I believe, give a buff, so I would always call to prioritize the sergeants. They do tend to hit a little bit hard. Like, I wouldn't say you have to be like chunk, maybe like, a DPS trinket and a stamina trinket just to give a little bit of extra health. They did kind of start to hit a little bit hard if the buff started stacking up. But other than that, very simple. We one-shot it. It's loot ship for a reason. All right, Deathbringer Sourfang. First real roadblock that you're going to have in the raid. Overall, it's pretty simple as a tank. It really is just a tank and spank for the most part. The raid is up to killing the blood beasts. The healers have to deal with Mark. You may be in charge of like doing some like DI shenanigans with marks when it's sub 30% when you're not tanking. I'm not going to go into too much of that because that may change. But just kind of like general tips. When the blood beasts are out, never Hammer of the Righteousness. You will pull aggro on them, and every time they hit you, they give shadow power, runic power, whatever, to Sourfang, which increases the amount of times that he can then use a mark on a random raid member. And the marks are kind of like your soft enrage. If you have too many marks out, you just can't keep them up, and if they die, they heal for, I think, like 20%, something like that, of the boss's health. So you never want to be hit by a blood beast. Glyph of Salvation will probably definitely be used during progression. When the boss hits sub 30%, he does start to hit like Optimus Prime dual wielding Megatrons. Like he hurts. It'd be really nice, if we had like, a bear tank or something like that. Wink, wink. Love you, Hunt. Anyway, he was also acting weird with taunts, similar to the way that Thorum would, when you would do like taunt swaps. And Thorum would just like ignore the taunt. Like, it wasn't that he immuned it or it missed. He just ignored it and was like DR'd out for some reason. I don't think that's going to be too much of an issue. In the beginning, we were doing like some bop AoE taunt strat for the Blood Beast, and I think that's what was DRing Sourfang. We did use the taunt hit percent glyph for our kill. I don't think that was necessarily needed, but honestly, like, this fight is not a DPS check on your end. So running like Glyph of Divine Plea, Glyph of Salvation, and the taunt hit percent glyph is probably what's best. The only other thing that you could possibly use, like if you wanted to, would be like Judgment for 10% increase more damage, but like lol kick W, who cares? You should probably have like a CD rotation ready for when he hits sub 30%. Theoretically, you should only tank him twice when he's under that. So like DP, Hand of Salvation, that type of thing. Don't really rely on healer externals because, Hunt is going to need those. He's a blood DK if the wind blows too hard and he just falls over. I'm kidding, Hunt. I love you. But in all seriousness, healers are going to be like worried about like the marks. So asking for them to do like a bubble sack on you and wasting 2 globals isn't really feasible, at least I think. Maybe doing like DP the first time you tank, and then the second time Hand of Salvation with like, a trinket on yourself would definitely be best. Just make sure you call your Hand of Salvation. That way, obviously Hunt doesn't pull off of you since there's no threat drop. And then Hunt will need a Hand of Sacrifice from you when he taunts sub 30%. Usually it's the first time up, so just as he's like calling his countdown on when he's going to taunt, just hit him with the Sacrifice. Kind of like other tips that you can do, like if the ads start to move like over to like the range that are close, there'll be a frost trap up here. As soon as they're about to like step off the frost trap, you can hit them with like a Hodge just to keep them there. If you want to, and you see like a bunch are going to one side and they're kind of like lower on health where you feel like you won't pull threat, you can also like Avengers shield them to slow them. And if it looks like they're about to hit a range and they're just having like this death stare of either I'm going to die or you're going to die, and you feel like you can also like taunt them and hope that, they're not going to hit you beforehand. It's a little bit riskier. It's something Hunt and I were doing towards the end on the kills. And that was once we had like a general feel of knowing like, okay, it's safe to taunt this. It will die before it reaches me. Festergut, kind of another simple fight as a tank. You're just going to tank him in the center of the room. Really, the only things that you have to watch out for are the spores and the bouncing oozes. So the bouncing oozes are going to be thrown from Professor Future's side, who's sitting up on a balcony here, and they'll be going like, this way across the room. So from bottom left to like top right. Sometimes he just goes to top left. You just want to watch out for those. They will blow up at a certain area. So you'll see a green mark on the ground, meaning that's where they're going to blow up. So even if it lands on top of you, but the green mark's not there, it doesn't blow up until it hits that green mark. However, the explosion is much larger than what the visual indication on the ground would be. So you want to make sure that you are like a decent distance away from it. It's best to like watch a VOD to see how big they are. You may have to make some like kind of dramatic movement because they do tend to hit like in the melee the most. And that's fine. Just don't move it too far away from the range. Try and keep it like centered of the room, and definitely communicate with your melee, when you're going to have to like move the boss in order to avoid one. You're going to tank up to 9 stacks of his debuff that he gives you. If you hit a 10th stack, he just kills the raid. So don't let that happen. But you're going to take it to 9. This will give you a 90% damage increase. And that buff is maintained while you tank. While your second tank picks up, so while you're a DPS from behind. So just watch your threat. What I was doing was as soon as Hunt taunted, I would salve myself immediately, and then still have to watch your threat as his stacks start to build up. And then the second time that you taunt the boss, he'll be doing about, I think it's 240% increased damage. It might be 260, but I think it was 240. So it does get a little sketchy towards the end of the second time that you taunt. So around the 6 stack mark is when I would like rotate DP into salve on myself, which hopefully brought everything home. And then dealing with the spores is super simple. There's gonna be a spore in melee. All you have to do is just stand like as close to his center hitbox as possible, and then the melee will just kind of meet you there. And you want to do that like right at the end, right? Because you don't want to all be grouped up the entire time the spore's out. Otherwise, it's going to put a bouncing ball right in the middle. So when there's like 2 seconds on the spore, step in, it explodes, step out. I have a typo here. It says top right. It says when spores come out, melee will have one. Make sure you get hit by every ooze explosion. No, you don't want to get hit by any ooze explosion. What you want to do is you want to get hit by every spore explosion. Ideally, you want to have all 3 in between his like big fart that he does. But as a tank, if you only have 2, like it's not the end of the world. You will live. But if you can get all 3, definitely aim for all 3. Rotface, another very simple encounter as a tank. The raid has to deal with the rest of the mechanics. You're just standing there tanking and spanking. The only real thing that you got to watch out for is like the oozes. Sometimes people will be lazy, or maybe they just don't have another option, and they'll like take the ooze through the center of the room. If it's a single small ooze, it does have like very high threat on somebody, similar to like faction champions. So you should be okay to like hit it with like a hammer, or if it runs through like a consecration, like you're not going to pull off of them. However, if two oozes meet near you and they combine into a bigger ooze, then that threat modifier is taken away and you will pull. So just kind of be careful if like two oozes somehow for some reason merge near you. It will be very hard for Hunt to be able to get off of it. The only other real mechanic here is when randomly a large ooze, not randomly, it's a timer, but a large ooze will explode. And let's just say like it explodes at like where the DK is now, right? You just want to kind of like take like a few steps to the right, well, downward right, right? On the PTR, some people were saying they could see where this like rain of ooze would land. They said there was markers on the ground. I couldn't see it. I think most of the melee couldn't. So if they fix that and you are actually able to see where the ooze is going to land, you should just theoretically be able to keep them in the middle of the room at all times and everybody can just rotate. But if for some reason you can't, especially during PTR testing and going into the race, just move him, to like the diametric opposite side of the room that ooze is going to explode. It typically never passed like the halfway mark when it did the explosion and the rain of ooze. Like I said, you don't have to move him much. Like really, you can stay inside the circle on the ground. Just making sure that you're on the opposite side of wherever the ooze is, and you're fine. Other than that, he doesn't really hit hard. You can be full monkey here if you want. Just completely up to you. Blood Prince Council. This was actually a very fun fight, I thought, as a tank. Phase 1 is just very simple, tank and spank. Positioning is very key here throughout the entire encounter. He does an empowered shock vortex, which everybody has to be X amount of yards apart, so making sure that the boss is like staying in the same position helps, because then the melee have the available space to run. You will kind of see ranged creep up here on the side. I don't know why ranged think that they're like needing to melee. Like maybe like there's some like warlock tech where they like get a melee in between corruption applications. I'm not sure. But it makes it so the melee then get too close to you. If your little weak aura indicator is red when he's doing empowered shock vortex, you tell the melee to take out the ranged, like, because they can't take you out. If you get knocked out of position, like, it's just so much worse than a ranged getting knocked out of position. So you be very vocal and tell them, you take out the ranged, like, do not take me out. And that's it. He'll eventually, the orb will switch, the main target goes to somebody else, and then that is what I'm going to call phase 2, which is this picture right here. In this situation, I just have it as the fire guy, which is tanked by another tank. What I was doing is immediately moving the boss from the center of the stage to the left of the stage. What was happening was his shock vortexes are supposed to spawn under random raid members. But what was happening is they were actually just spawning under me. Now that could be fixed. It could be intentional. It could be something Zyrene can't fix because he, is more important, to release information to who early so they have an advantage versus fixing things. I don't know. But if it's still acting that way, the shock vortex always spawns under you. But I was using that to my advantage by using them as movement abilities, essentially. So again, I'm not going into the details, but every time you move, you get a stacking debuff that deals shadow damage, and it can deal a lot of damage. However, if you get blasted by one of these shock vortexes on the ground, it doesn't actually count as you moving because you're not taking steps. Therefore, you can use the shock vortexes to position yourself around the room, making so the shock vortexes are never anywhere near like the melee and like the range. So I'd go to the left, shock vortex comes down, I get yeeted over here, I tank the boss, shock vortex comes down, I get yeeted across the room to the other side, another shock vortex up around, and I would just keep like going in that like square. That way I wasn't in like random spots of the room. If it did come back to me and I was the main target, then the melee got to run and they have stacks, right? I wasn't ever outranging healers. But I could also assist possibly with like the orbs that fall from the ground if need be. So it looks a little bit confusing. Definitely more one of those things you just got to do once or twice to see. But overall, fun fight as a tank. You get to kind of use like clever use of in-game mechanics to kind of cheese it. And then Blood Mommy, not much here at all really as a tank. The most important thing again is like positioning. That's kind of like the theme of this wing. Watch your threat in the beginning. Obese Idiot currently is the first bite target, which is a Feral Druid, which any tank knows. A Feral Druid that is bear weaving, that's competent, can definitely give you a run for your money, especially when they're being fed tricks. So definitely like watch your threat there at the beginning. You definitely want to make sure that you're maintaining threat, but he needs to be second in order to be bit first. Other things like, you want to make sure that the off tank is always like inside your character model. Again, I'm not going over the mechanics. You should know what that is by now. But you just want to make sure that your movement is planned and fluid and very well communicated. So when she goes up on the air phase, right, I come over to this area where you see the paladin. That's where my position was. And then when she comes down on the air phase, I'd go back, stand on the tank spot, but facing towards her, right? So I'd actually go up to where she is right now, not the tank spot. I misspoke. I'm sorry. So go up to where she is, face down the stairs to where she lands. Hunt is there with you. She sits there. Again, you want to do it quick because you don't want the melee to have to be moving a lot, especially if they get like the beam or the fire. So you want to be quick about it, but it needs to be well communicated. So she runs back to you. She's hitting you. You say, okay, Hunt, we're moving in 3, 2, 1, and you just walk through her. You walk through her. She turns around. She does a 180. Hunt's in your character box. Everything's fine. If you don't communicate or you just decide, hey, we're moving, and Hunt doesn't know, then what's going to happen is you're going to walk through. The melee aren't going to know you're moving, so they're not, veering out to the side, and you're going to get linked with a melee, and they're just going to die. So again, very simple fight, not very difficult at all. The only other things that I could think of is like things that I was doing that people didn't necessarily know I was doing or didn't ask for. I was placing my Sacred Shield on less tanky classes during the air phase, like mages, enhancement shamans, etc. Classes that are, glass cannons. I was also ready to hand a sacrifice anybody who got low on health. So like I knew which range were kind of away from the range stack. And if I saw that they were kind of like 50, 60% health and there's a barrage coming out, I'd hand a sacrifice them to try and help them out. And then kind of same thing with like lay on hands. If I saw one that was like really low, like a warlock life tapping in the air phase as a barrage is coming down, I just lay on hands them. Really, you're only going to have to deal with one air phase, but it's like the scariest part of the fight. Once you get past the air phase, everything else is, fine. And then Dreamwalker, not really much to say about Dreamwalker. We didn't actually get a kill. Could be in tandem with people just, being tired. There's not really much to do as a tank. I had the left side. I just kind of stood in the middle, would make important calls, call out when blazing skeletons are coming up, etc. And just kind of pulled everything towards the middle of it. Just being very vocal with, the DKs, like when I need a grip or something like that. When the patchwork mobs come out and they die, they spawn worms, similar to the worms that are leading to Hodir. Like when you walk over their like nest, they don't all come out at once. They kind of come out over like the course of like 6 seconds. You just got to watch those because they will run all over the room, and even though they're worms, they do really hurt the healers that they sit on. Other than that, just like things that you can do is like use your Avenger Shield to slow the suppressors as they're coming in. You can Holy Wrath Glyph. That way you can stun them more frequently. You can use Hammer of Justice to stun them. Those are really the only things that you can like truly stun or really matter. But outside of that, super simple fight. Just communicate well. The healers are going to be talking mainly, so you don't have to talk too much. Just mainly calling out important targets. Outside of that, yeah, no, that's it. We didn't get to do Professor Future Side because he was bugged. We didn't get to do Syndragosa, and we didn't get to do Lich King, obviously. Just kind of some like final thoughts on the matter. If you're a tank, you definitely want to be picking up leatherworking. With the addition of epic gems, jewel crafting is only 1 stamina better than leatherworking is, because leatherworking gives 102 stamina, jewel crafting gives 103, so it's only a 1 stamina difference. The difference is with leatherworking is you get those really nice resist enchants for your wrists, which will be really nice for Syndragosa, at least until the buff starts stacking or you get better gear. And then also, there's just a shit ton of frost resist needed for Syndragosa. Definitely look towards getting a tank weapon, even if it's a 1.5 speed. I know that Zeus said he's seen people do it in with Sethralus and stuff like that, but the vast amount of logs that I've seen is like tanks using like full mitigation gear, including a mitigation weapon, even for like Lich King himself. You can get the frost resist ring crafted from Jewel Crafters, which is pretty solid. definitely start farming Ani 25 for the resistance ring from Ani 25. Get, a cloak enchant for frost resistance on your cloak. And then in tandem with the leather working and the other stuff that I just mentioned, like you'll be in a really solid place for frost resistance for Syndragosa. Outside of that, best of luck. If you have any questions on this, please feel free to, message me on Discord. I can, go through this in a little bit more detail if needed. Best of luck.